And welcome back. Good day to all. If you are following the videos in this series, this is going to be the, as it's titled currently in the video, I think it will be titled, Will It Run? This is going to be the trial to see if Sleeper Apple, otherwise known as Candy Apple, will start after all the modifications that have been done to it. We did receive the tune file back from our tuner a short while ago. And we're going to be in the process of getting it uploaded to our Trinity EX, which we'll use to then flash it to the vehicle itself. I've got you looking at the Trinity EX currently, and what we're going to do is, just to show you, you'll see that when you load up or plug a Trinity into a PC, you'll see it maps like a T2 volume. It gives you to a drive letter. So generally, all you have to do, well, I'm going to take the tune file from our tuner that you see here and just drag and drop it onto this window, not into any one of these folders, but just onto the window itself. And generally, within a couple of seconds, you'll see the tool, the scan tool, or the programmer tool, in this case our Trinity, should update and then say it's, you may see it say importing file, or you may not. I know on my smaller Diablo device that we use on the 1500 it does, and I'm trying to see what I can do to kind of block the glare for you. You're getting glare off the surface because of all the shop lights. That looks kind of okay there. So again, I'm just going to drag and drop the file and we'll see if I can capture this here. And it may do it automatically. It may. There it goes. Custom tune has been loaded. Nice. So installing update, perfect. And then what it will do is, now that it's been imported, you'll notice it'll no longer show here. It'll actually be removed from the root of this drive once it does its import. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to pause you, and I'm going to bring you back. We're going to be in the vehicle. We're going to plug the scan tool in, and then we'll get it flashed. And then once it's flashed, I'm sorry, not the scan tool, we'll get the tuner plugged in and do the flash. And then we're going to plug the scan tool in after that and do another code scan of the system. I want to see if that barometric pressure fault code that was showing before should go away after this update. If it continues, then we may have a problem with either the SRT4 MAF sensor that procharger sent us, or we could potentially have an issue with wiring. And we're also, just for good measure, even though we have a nice new fresh battery that has been charged up, we will get our battery charger connected. We'll have it in power supply mode in order to just safeguard any power dips or issues of that nature that may be happening while we're doing this flash. Again, just purely a protective measure at this point. Probably, like I said, probably not needed because we know we got a nice fresh battery. We know we got a nice fresh charge on it, but still not a bad practice to get into. So let me get all this attached, bring you back, and then we'll get the tuner plugged in and we'll flash this update. So one moment. And welcome back. So as you saw in the previous clip, we got our tune imported into our tuner, and we got the battery charger on power supply duty, currently out attached to the battery. And for the time being, while we're doing this, I did unplug the Banks iDash and its associated hardware from the OBD2 port. We're just going straight in. I don't think it would cause an issue to have that stuff connected while we're doing this, but just for safety's sake, since we are writing to the PCM, I'm just going to go, again, plug in direct. So I'm just going to put the key into the on position, and where we sit right now is we still have the fuel pump fuse out so it won't prime the fuel rail, and we still have the solenoid wire disconnected from the starter. So in the event we turn the key too far, it won't attempt to spin the engine over. And we'll wait for that ding and the stop, and there'll probably be one more ding when it comes up and tells us that the windshield washer fluid and such is low. So let's get our programmer or tuner plugged in and wait for it to boot. And again, sorry for the glare. I'll try to stay positioned where I seem to be at least blocking most of it. I got you sitting on the, just straight up on the seat on a tripod, so that it may jump, the video may jump around a bit, and I apologize. Okay, so here's where we go. We should be able to go into tuning. Now it's just trying to communicate with the vehicle or verify it can communicate, and we do not need to update. Now, this is one of the items that the tuner sent me along with the file. One of the stipulations is we are not to update the software in this tuner yet. He is very specific about that. So we're going to skip checking for any kind of updates. We should be under custom tuning because it's one we imported. And install tune. Oh, it also goes without saying that he did instruct us to not only not update the tuner, but not to revert the truck back to a stock tune from the tuner. And that's the one we're looking for. So we only got the one custom imported tune. Yes, and it has been set up for 93 octane because I can get 93 octane in my area. I said, would you like to install the tune as is? Yes, we want to install it as is. Tune selected. Adjustable parameter mod. So there's no adjustable parameter mods on this. It's fine. And you're going to hear the dash start to ding. And it will ding, unfortunately, through the majority of this. Okay, it wants to turn the ignition off. Hit screen to continue. Turn the ignition to on, but do not start. Okay, we are on. Okay, turn the ignition back off. And turn the ignition on once again. Okay, so of course, continue to return to the main menu. All right, perfect. So we can unplug our tuner at this point. And let me show you one thing different on the dash, which is encouraging. I don't know if I showed you this before, but we'll verify it with the scan tool like we were talking about earlier. On the dash, let me get you situated here. You'll see that it just says that we have the door open, which we know. And we're low windshield washer fluid, which is fine. Now, before, when the barometric pressure sensor was out of whack, this was flashing a lightning bolt. Now, since we've tuned it, you'll notice no more lightning bolt. So it's a good thing. So that means it is aware that it now has a 3-bar, or should now be aware that it has a 3-bar MAF sensor installed in the vehicle. So we now take our tuner, put that off to the side. Again, I'm going to grab the scan tool. We're just going to leave banks disconnected through this process. Again, nothing against banks, not to say that it would cause an issue, but let's see. You alleviate the chance of potential errors. Okay, so now I got you. Let me get the dongle plugged in for the scan tool. And local diagnostics is going to be American, Dodge. Let me see if I can get you a bit closer to the screen. There we go. And let me see, we're running version 3450, 3455 is available as an upgrade. We're just going to go with the version that we have, which is good for now. (16-pin connector). We're going to automatically search. Make sure that it can pull the VIN on its own, which it did do. So we're definitely talking to the PCM, so that's good. Now let's do a system scan like we did last time. Just verify it can see everything on the bus. All right, perfect. So if we go into system list, scan, system typology. Oh, actually, I want to go into system list. Let's go into powertrain module. Read fault codes, DTC information, and no DTCs. Perfect. Now, just like we did last time, before the new tune, let's go into read data stream. No, I don't want the O2s. Barometric pressure. Wrong button. Okay, I already got one selected. I'm hitting the down button, and I shouldn't be hitting the down button. No, I should be. I'm doing it right. Need data stream, go. Okay, 39.32. So the default value without the engine running, which is close to the same default value we were getting before, it now sees that as a valid value. Again, it's 3-bar MAF sensor now versus what it had before, which was not a 3-bar MAF sensor. Beautiful. Okay, so again, see, that is green, no faults. And let's see, diagnostics plan, we don't need one. System list, yeah, we can go back in the system list. Scan, normal. Yep, stuff is not equipped. It still sees everything on the bus that it should be seen. All right, perfect. System topology. So I'm going to go back on the system topology. Let's also do this. Let's also do a smart detection. Ooh, interesting. That's the first time the software has done that. Might also explain that erratic behavior we were getting when I tried to select the PID. Remember, every time I hit the down arrow to go out of it, it was bringing it back to the previous screen, which it shouldn't have been doing that. Let's try that again. That's actually the first time I've seen that program crash out like that. Yep. It's continuing to crash. That is not good. I may have to restart the tablet. Okay, so it says to upgrade. Interesting. More versions. More update versions. Shouldn't have to renew. I'm renewed on this for another 2 years. Yeah. Yeah, not quite sure why it thinks that. I shouldn't have to. No, let's try it. Yep, 16-pin connector, automatically search. Yep, that is the vehicle in question. Smart detection. Most of these should just be from the ECU being reset. And let's do a system list. Yeah, stored. You see all that's lost communication. Well, the reason why you're seeing a lot of lost communication in here, you can see it's all stored. Yeah, lost communication. What was happening, it's the reason why the dash was also dinging like crazy when we were doing the tune update, is because it kind of takes the bus offline, or at least the way the modules communicate with each other when that update is happening. So that's normal. And you can see the only one that's really showing active down here is the heated steering wheel, which we've already covered. So everything else is stored. So what we can do is just actually we don't even need to clear the DTCs, because they're all stored except for the one being active that we know will be active. Yes. And the diagnostics, let's remove our dongle. Okay, now I'm going to shut the ignition off. And what we're going to do next is going to go ahead and plug the Banks adapter, or Banks gauges and equipment back in. And then we're going to do another ignition on and just verify that we still have the settings that we're looking for. And then if that looks good, then I'll pause you. We'll reconnect the starter cable, or the control wire, to the solenoid. But we will leave the fuel pump disconnected. And that will allow us to crank it, because what we want to do is crank it a few times. And before we allow it to start, I want to verify that we see oil pressure before we go for a full-on start. So it may take a couple of ignition cycles before we see it, and hopefully we do. If we don't see any oil pressure, then it could mean we've got a bad oil pressure sensor, or we've got something else going on. Okay, there we go. It sees them both. Now, make one comment on channel B. If you remember in the previous video, channel B is going to be our boost gauge. Channel A was our fuel pressure, channel B will be our boost. Now you'll notice channel A, these are PSI-A sensors both, which means they're relative to basically absolute vacuum. And now this one is showing, this is our fuel pressure, we're showing 15 PSI. Come on, wake back up. I know you weren't receiving an input. Also, this shouldn't go to sleep once it gets an RPM signal from the engine, from my understanding. It's just going to sleep because this doesn't have any input. And channel B, you'll notice, is 77, even though that should be our boost gauge. This, if I'm not mistaken, should be reading close to 14.9 or 15 psi. It should be reading barometric, normal barometric pressure. Because again, the engine's not started, nothing's running. You'll notice our fuel rail isn't primed, so it's just reading barometric pressure right now. And our boost gauge should be reading the same thing. Now, off camera, I did take that sensor and plug it into channel C and channel D, and it reads the same. So I think that 0 to 15 PSI sensor we've got plugged into that manifold to read our boost / vacuum is actually bad. If I'm not mistaken, it should be reading 15 PSI. It should just be reading barometric pressure, normal barometric pressure at this point for our sea level. But it's not doing that. As you saw, it's reading 77 something pounds. So it's not going to stop us from doing a test start today, but I did order a new sensor for that, and in the next couple of days, once it comes in, we can confirm that's an issue. We'll also be able to kind of confirm it once the truck does start. That should start reading manifold vacuum, so that number should change, whether it's correct or not again. But I think that number it's showing now is wrong, and I think there may be something up with that sensor. But either way, I will ramble on long enough. So now that all that powers up and looks good, now that we're flashing, it looks good. We're no longer seeing the fault code for the barometric pressure, aka the new MAF sensor, so it is now aware that it has a 3-bar MAF sensor installed. Not seeing any other fault codes for any other missing sensors or systems. I'm going to pause you now. We're going to plug in the starter, and when I bring you back, I'll get you focused in on the gauge, on the dash here. We're going to bring up oil pressure and just crank it over a couple of times and verify we get oil pressure, and make sure that we don't hear anything else that we shouldn't be hearing while we're doing those couple of test starts. And then once we get oil pressure, I'll go get some 2 gallons of fresh gas. We'll dump it in the tank. We'll get some extra help and extra eyes out here just to kind of watch things. And then we'll go for a startup. So one moment, let me get some stuff set up and I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. So I'm just kind of holding you here. Center of the steering wheel zoomed in pretty far, or as far as I can. Got you set on oil pressure on the center of the dash here. So as it stands right now, we got the battery charger disconnected just so that we don't ruin it while we're trying to pull, several hundred amps in the battery here during the start process, or during at least the couple of test starts. We've obviously got the starter reconnected. We still have the fuel pump relay disconnected. So this is just going to be to turn the engine over and see if we can build some oil pressure. So that being said, let's see what we get. Okay, so far nothing. Okay, I'm going to give it one more go. Okay, I'm going to give that starter a little bit of rest. I was hoping to see some oil pressure by now. Okay, I'm going to give the starter a bit more rest here. So let me give that starter a couple minutes to cool down. I may try this one more time, and I may pull a sensor, oil pressure sensor out of the block there and see if we're getting pressure. So one moment. And welcome back. So we got you set up. We got you pointed at the engine right now. And we could just kind of looked everything over. Everything right now looks good. I got an extra set of eyes and ears out here to kind of help us along. And yes, and as you saw in the previous clip, we didn't see oil pressure show up on the screen, but I've had that problem before with the 2500 when we switched its oil pump out. And what would happen with that one was the same process here. We key cycled it 3 and 4 times and never saw oil pressure build. And when we went ahead and started it, within about 4 seconds, we saw oil pressure. So with just the kind of, I think we've key cycled it about 4 times, ran it through. Everything is looking good out here. It's we're not seeing like the belts or anything move off of track. So what we're going to go ahead and do, and we've got the garage door cracked at this point, just for some ventilation. We're going to key cycle it a couple of times. We're going to verify that we don't have any fuel leaks next to that fitting that we put in. And provided we don't have any fuel leaks next to the fitting that we put in, then we're going to go ahead and start it. Now, if we don't see oil pressure within about 5 to 10 seconds of starting this thing up, then we're going to immediately kill it and we're going to start poking in to some stuff. And if we don't see oil pressure, hopefully it's just a bad sensor and not something that would cause us to have to take the whole front of the motor back apart again. So here we go. It is once I find out what I did with the key. Got it. So again, you're going to hear a couple clicks and then we're going to go for it. Be careful, don't want to stand that close. So we're reading about 13 pounds of fuel right now. I'm going to key cycle it one more time. We're up to about 19. One more. $30. I heard it fill the fuel rail. We're just waiting for the eye dash to wake back up. So 46, we're almost there. Okay. Says we're about 70 pounds of fuel pressure at this point, so we've got what we need. So here we go. Sorry, that was me. That was me. I hit the ignition. Sorry. All right. Beautiful. We got about 80 pounds of oil pressure on that startup. everything sounded good. Obviously, we need to do a much longer run to make sure we don't have any issues. What are you pointing at? Fuel. Okay, yeah. My helper out here is just reminding me that we definitely don't have any fuel drips, and that fuel sensor is working correctly. And you know, I'll cut you in when we do a much longer run. But so yeah, that's what was going on. The only thing I can fathom is, remember, that oil pump is a new oil pump put out by Melling. It's a high volume. The key cycling just wasn't enough to spin it fast enough to get it to prime. But we got 80 pounds of oil pressure on that start, which is awesome, by the way. And what I'm going to do now, like we spoke about before, now that it ran for a couple of seconds and kind of started coming down in idle, we're going to let the fluid settle, and I'm going to come back and we're going to check the transmission fluid, because it should have primed the torque converter. We had some valve train noise, what sounded to be like maybe valve train noise, and some transmission noise. You may have heard it on the camera, but you'll heard that little bit of a chatter, and then once the oil pressure built up, it kind of just subsided and went quiet. Which is awesome. That's what we were looking for, because we were hearing a little bit of chatter in there when we were just dry starting it, and it was kind of getting us concerned. So I'm going to pause you. We're going to let it settle, and then looks like I'll have to. Transmission fluid looks good. Now, just in full honesty, when we were dry cycling it, the transmission fluid used about half its reservoir, so we did have to top that off. I'm sorry. I keep saying transmission. It's power steering fluids. The power steering fluid's been topped off. Like I said, we're going to let it settle. I want to pause you. We're going to let it settle, and we're going to bring you back. But we test fired. So awesome. We're getting there. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, I figured I'd show you some of the fluid levels after our little bit of a run there. And the first one we're going to check is oil. And if you remember how far on the stick we were, now granted we were a little bit overfilled, but we knew that we were going to drop that level by quite a bit once the oil filter finished priming. Then basically the entire oiling of the oiling system of the engine got primed. In other words, pickup tube, oil pump, all the galleys, so on and so forth. So let's see here. If you can see on our dip, there we go. That's what we're looking for, and hopefully you can see that there. We're right there. So our add line is here. We're a hair above. Well, not a hair above. We're actually quite a bit of ways above. So there's our oil line. Trying to get this to where it'll focus, and maybe you can see that a bit better. Our oil line is here, our add line is here. So we're still above the add line, we're still in safe, but if you remember when we started, we were way up here. So we pulled down probably about a quart. So there's been about a quart of oil used, you know, to get the pickup tube primed, and the oil pump primed, and all the galleys and everything else that it went through. Yes, and I do have more of that break-in oil on order, but however, it was still within the safe marks to operate and go on a longer run. But we will top that off once that additional I ordered a couple of additional quarts of that break-in oil. Once that gets here, we'll get it topped off. The next is the transmission. So we kind of looked at things here. Now granted, once again we're checking this transmission cold and not in running conditions, but we're just comparing it to what it looked like when it was cold and we were filling all the fluids. So with that short bit of a run there, it should have had enough time to finish filling the torque converter and such. This is going to be a little bit harder to see, but we're right about there on the stick. Whereas before, we were up to like kind of this first bend, if you remember. So we probably also, looks like, went through at least an additional quart of transmission fluid on that startup, and I'm going to assume most of that, again, new line set, new transmission cooler, plus the converter itself. So once we go for a longer run and start getting things up to temperature, I actually say once we start it and have it a longer run in general, we can check that at the cold level and just make sure that we got enough fluid in the transmission. We may have to add another half a quart or so, no biggie. Check the fluid in the radiator. That probably required maybe about a half a cup of additional fluid. And so far, everything else is looking good. The power steering reservoir looked good after that run. Didn't need to have any additional fluid added to it. We did run into one check engine code after that short run, and it was for the SRV solenoid on the very back of this intake. If you remember when we got it in, it is an aftermarket intake. It's excellent as far as everything else that we used it for, but that little SRV, that short runner valve solenoid in the back, threw a circuit code at first. That one cleared, then it set another type of SRV code, and I've since cleared it. If that SRV code comes back, then we're going to have to look into getting a different intake for this. If you remember when we were putting it in, that solenoid was, twisted a little bit too far from what it looked like on the OEM intake. And if that's the case, like I said, if that code comes back, we'll just bite the bullet and we'll get a new OEM intake for it and go ahead and just get that switched out. It'd be a little bit of a pain to have to unbolt all that to get that out of there, but yeah, it can be done. If we got to do it, we'll do it. If that's the worst thing that happens with this rebuild is that we have to replace the intake on it, I'll take it. And everything else so far is looking good. Like I said, no problem with the belts. Belts haven't jumped grooves. Belts haven't shown any signs of shredding. And that little bit of a start, none of that. So we look good from there. No other codes in any of the other modules were coming up. Now, granted, as you saw, it does successfully fire. It does successfully run. Like I said, the valve train noises that we were hearing and the little quirks and things of that nature, which sounded a bit odd, did seem to go away once we did get oil pressure. And once again, we got about 80 psi, I think is what the gauge settled at, using that milling pump. And again, that's cold, and that was just a little bit of a short run. And we'll be curious to see what those oil pressures kind of come down to at idle and then when the engine's hot and things of that nature. The fuel pressure sensor is working just fine on the banks. And I do think that the sensor that we have down here to monitor our boost is in fact broken. And like I said, one of those is already on the way to get that replaced. So what I want to do next is go for a longer start on this one. Get you around where you can see the engine components a little bit better on this one. Let you kind of hear a little bit of the exhaust out the back. Let it run a little bit longer and get a little bit warmer. Obviously watch and see if that SRV sensor comes back. And we did put this PCV tube, the old factory tube, back in just for the time being, so that way we didn't end up with an intake leak. However, when the Banks catch can gets here, we'll obviously look at pulling this off and replacing this tube with it. But for now, that's what we've got to put on there, so at least we can kind of start and run and go further. So what I would like to do is, now that we've done a cursory check of our fluids, is get you in the cab of the truck, start it up, let it run a little bit longer. We'll also have a scan tool plugged in it, just kind of actively scanning everything. I want it to come up at high idle. I'd like it to come down to normal idle after coming off of high idle, and then just kind of monitor everything when it comes down to, like I said, a little bit when it comes off of high idle. There we go. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention this as well. Our safety clip for our fuel line did come in. Now, interesting enough, I had a hard time finding a Dodge part number for that one, or any part number for that one. I did, however, obviously that's a same size fuel line that multiple car manufacturers would use. And after doing a little bit of a searching, yes, that's a GM part number. And that fuel clip fits this 2012 1500 just fine. That is a fuel, as Dodge calls it, that is a fuel rail retention clip. And like I said, for whatever reason, I couldn't find a part number under a 2012 for that. Now, granted, if I search probably a 2013, 2014, 2015, anything that's within the same gen as this 1500, I'm sure would have fit fine. But just interesting enough, Google actually came up with a GM part number. So sure enough, I ordered it and it fit like a glove, no issue at all. So that's taken care of. That's taken care of. Everything out here looks good. Like I said, yeah, let me do that. Let me get you in bed in the cab of the truck next. Get you pointed at a scan tool. We're gonna let it run a little while longer. Again, just to recap, I want it to come down off of high idle down to normal idle and just kind of let it run for a little bit there, and we'll kind of see how things go. And no, I don't have a spill-proof funnel on this yet. We will get to that. I'm just trying to minimize the amount of moving things at this point that I have to kind of keep an eyeball peeled on. But don't worry, like I said, you saw the video where we vacuum filled it, and then purged it. So 99, probably 99% of the air is out of this system anyway. That being said, let me let you go. And I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. I'll try to talk over it, but you can probably hear it. We've got the fan going in the garage window just to help pull some air out. We've got our garage door cracked again, just to make sure that we've got some good ventilation in here. So what I'm going to do is just get the scan tool ready in the state where it can scan. I do have you zoomed in, so looks like we should be able to see that there. Yep, I did find the vehicle. And we'll leave it here, and then we'll do a startup, and then we'll do a smart detection. Fuel rail says it's got about 70.9 pounds in it, so I'll show you that here. So you can see our first sensor is doing what it's supposed to do. And it does. There's no RPM signal from the truck yet, so Banks is putting itself to sleep. Come on. There we go. 70.6. And then you'll see that's supposed to be our vacuum slash boost. It shouldn't be that high, but like I think we covered that already. We'll verify that when we get the new sensor. But the fuel pressure sensor is working like a champ. And let's see here, just so you can kind of see the oil pressure on startup. And I do apologize. Today happened to also be the day that one of my GoPros broke, so we're down to just the one. So you can see about 80 pounds of fuel pressure, 80 pounds of oil pressure. Hear the idle coming down. A little bit of smoke, but that's normal. It's just stuff burning off of the exhaust. Yeah, you can smell it. It's just the all the oils and stuff in our hands just burning off of the exhaust. You can see we come down to about an idle temp at this point, an idle RPM at this point, I should say. Let's do a system scan. We're going to do a smart detection. PCM showing 2, but it's probably that darn SRV again. And if that's the case, we'll have to swap that intake out. But no biggie, I've got an intake and a new actuator on order. So let's go in the system list. Yeah, see the intake runner, position sensor, circuit 1 bank high, and the SRV control circuit. So yeah, that SRV back there is having problems, probably because like we saw before, it didn't fit all that well. But so far, that's all we're seeing, which is good. Oh, I went back too far. What I want to see is system lists, PCM. And then come on, find it. There we go. ODB2. And what I'm looking for is suspended, suspended, suspended. A lot of the tests are starting to pass. Come on. Looks like they changed the screens around a little bit. So that's O2 heaters, O2 monitors, O2 monitors. Waiting on misfire monitor status. Used to be able to pull up just the misfire monitors by themselves, which is what I'm looking for. Let's see if we can find it in the data stream. So far everything's looking good. Good oil pressure. Still about 70 something pounds. Not seen anything out of the ordinary yet. Yeah, not finding it there. Waiting on that. What I'm looking for are the misfire counters. They've changed the location of them inside this software since last I used it, so I apologize. I'll have to dig for that. It sounds good. It doesn't sound like it has a miss. We're smoking quite a bit. But again, that's to be expected. All the belts look good. Not seen any leaks. See if I can get you to hear the exhaust, but the camera's not going to do it justice. Sounds mean. Definitely sounds like she's got a cam. What we could do is check that transmission fluid real quick. Without it, we're running it idle. So let me get you propped up here. Sorry, I'm trying to keep you from falling over. transmission fluid. She's a little low, so let me go ahead and cut this. I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in on the scan tool here, and I finally found it inside of the tab that we were in, and I'll show it to you. And I apologize for having to fumble through this. It threw me off that they changed this during the last update. But OBD2 monitors, including misfire. If we go into that, it is all the way at the bottom of this massive monitor screen they give you. So just about everything that could be monitored on here, from oxygen sensors to emission status to you name it, is now being monitored on this one tab, which is convenient from that aspect. But kind of a pain, because they used to have just these misfire counters on a tab all by themselves, which was convenient, and I really wish they'd kind of go back to doing that. But you can see we got 5, 6, 7, 8, 4, 2, and 1. So it looks like we're going to have to scroll a little bit to see all of them, but starts right there where it says which cylinder is misfiring. And actually, now that I see something, it looks like we could potentially do this as well. Yeah, we can actually collapse everything that we don't want to see. Like if we scroll up and see SC cutout number 8, we can collapse that, which is cool because it'll make it a lot easier to find. But anyway, it's down here at the very bottom. Starts with misfire monitor status. You probably saw it when I was scrolling through it earlier. Anyway, what I want to do is start it up, let it come down off high idle, come down into normal idle, and just make sure that we're not seeing any misfires on our cylinders when we do that. That might, you know, point to a compression issue. Like I said, it sounds good. It's not violently shaking. The exhaust sounded good. I don't hear anything of a miss on there. The exhaust sounds really nice now compared to what it did before with the MagnaFlow, plus having that, plus being cammed now. She's got a nice lope to her. Like I said, I don't think that the camera audio is going to do it justice. But what I want to do is start it, check these real quick, let it calm down. Then we're gonna go back out there into the engine compartment. And I'm just going to pull the dipstick on the transmission again. And what I want to do is check it on the cold status. And all I'm looking to do is make sure the fluid is up to the cold line, because we're not up to operating temperature yet. Once we're up to the cold line, we should be good from that standpoint forward. And then, of course, once we get it out for its first drive, we'll check it when it's hot. But everything else so far is looking good. So let's see here. Much quieter. I don't know if you noticed, but the valve train noise that we were getting is gone at this point. We were getting a nice clatter, which is perfectly normal for a newly rebuilt engine. You'll get a little bit of valve train, you'll get a little bit of lifter clatter in there until it calms down. You can see we're in waiting status. We're coming down. Let's just make sure that we're actually seeing data here. What I'm going to do is go into System List, PCM again. Now that we know it's there, now that we know that we have to go all the way to the bottom now. Just waiting for the scan tool to catch up to what we're doing. There we go, 0000000. We'll see at 800. You can see we're at steady zeros, which is nice across the board. Okay, awesome. Let's go out there and check some transmission fluid. You can hear that supercharger whining away. Sorry for the headphone users. Yeah, we need more. Sorry, didn't realize you fell over there. That's about another quart in. I'm gonna do a recheck. The stick. We're on the stick under cold at this point for the transmission. Yep. I'm gonna add about another half a quart just to be on the safe side, but we're looking good. So you can see our cooling fans working. So our tuner has adjusted our cooling parameters, because again we're running a 180-degree thermostat. Okay, no misfires, which is excellent. You can see we're down to about 28 psi, but that's again, it's normal because the oil's had time to heat up at this point. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off. Yeah, and you can definitely see that when it was running that our vacuum / pressure gauge sensor is definitely not working. Okay, so with that being said, that was awful loud. Like I said, I do apologize. It sounds good. Sounds really, really good. And it looks like the only issue we have, we're not seeing any leaks. Looks like most of the stuff has finally stopped burning off the exhaust and such. Yeah, we're getting nice and, yeah, we're getting nice and toasty warm. Definitely getting up in the temp. Now remember, we went with a 180-degree thermostat in here, so it opening sooner than it should. And you also heard, like I said, the cooling fan kicking on, so that verified that's working as well. Looks like we're also getting decent charging voltage, so we're good there. None of our belts are, showing any signs of being out of alignment, so that's good. And you can hear that this bad boy is nice and loud. And now our transmission fluid is looking good. At least for the temperature that it's at. It's not quite at its operating temperature because it hasn't been driven around yet, but I am going to add about another half a quart to a quart to that because we just started to hit the cold mark on the dipstick, so we'll have to keep our eyeball on that. And I've got about, one more quart of ATF4. So total, as far as the additional fluid added to the transmission to account for the lines, the transmission cooler, and the torque converter, we put a half a quart in the torque converter, about another half a quart to top it off. That was 2. Then I added another half a quart after the first start. So that was about 1.5. We added another one. So we probably added about 2.5, almost 3 quarts of additional fluid to the transmission at this point. But again, it's something we expected to happen. It's not out of the norm. So items we know that we need to address is that pressure sensor, which is already on the way. We apparently need to pull this intake off out of here and get it replaced with something different, as well as the SRV actuator in the back. Unfortunately, don't want to have to tear an intake off it, but I think we're going to have to. I've already got all of this parts on the way. It'll be here sometime later this week, so we'll definitely make a follow-up video and kind of show what it looks like with that in. So, according to my tuner, once we have this on the road and we have it drivable, what he wants to see is just a short 4 to 5 minute drive with a lot of starts, a lot of stops, basically getting it up to speed, getting it down to speed, stopping, getting up, getting down, get up, basically. And I think what he's checking for there is just surging activities, shifting, things of that nature. Again, just kind of starting slow and reporting back changes that are needed from there. So, and all the Banks items are working. So yeah, I think we're good at this point. I just hope the camera did a really good job of catching that. And on that last start, you may have not heard it through the camera, but just to reiterate, the valve train noise that we were hearing, the clacking, looks like that stopped as of the last start. It started up nice and quiet and nice and smooth. Which is great. And but again, if you've worked on these Hemis before and you've done valve jobs, that's completely normal that it sometimes takes several key cycles and even potentially a couple of drive cycles, especially if you're still using the MDS solenoids, for them to finally kind of pump up and quiet down. So the only thing left, and we'll have to wait for it to cool off and bring it up to temperature again. But once it cools off, like I said, we'll get a spill-proof funnel on here for the next startup. Let it come up to temp, turn the heater, cabinet heater on, just things of that nature, and we'll finish burping the system. But awesome. Well, like I said, we've got a lot done. She's a runner. This is awesome. This is a huge milestone completed at this point, and I would like to thank you for following the journey thus far. But again, we got a lot more to go. We need to get the intake swapped out. We got a set of 410 gears on the bench over there that eventually need to go in here to replace the 355. Plus, we need to bring you along for the testing, tuning updates. Once the break-in period's done, we're going to take a sample of that oil, get it sent off to Blackstone Labs so they can kind of tell us if they're seeing anything out of the ordinary in the break-in oil that shouldn't be there, as well as, being able to finally do some wide open throttle pulls and such once we're out of that break-in period. So with that being said, I know that this was a long one, but as hopefully was as exciting for you as it was for us. But this is awesome. We got a runner. And if you have subscribed thus far, I thank you. If you have not, please consider to do so. We've got a lot done. We've got a lot more coming. And I thank you much. Bye.